Hello, AP Psychology students. It is Thursday, February 2nd, I believe, and I am not here. I am on a trip with my Model UN club, and I will be gone both today and tomorrow. So I'm going to be putting together two videos, this one today and then another one for you to watch tomorrow, that gives you kind of a rundown on what we're learning about to stay on pace regarding our Unit 7. So this is going to be a look at emotion. If you recall, what we've been talking about so far is in Unit 7, we have learned about MESH here, which is motivation, emotion, and stress and health. So we're done with motivation at this point, at least we should be. We're moving into emotion, and we're going to be learning about emotional theories today and tomorrow with these video lessons. When I come back next week, I might have a few things that I want to recap with you guys, but for the most part, it should cover most of the required topics. So on my screen right now, I haven't posted the assignments that go with this lesson, but it will be there by the time you are watching this video. So the thing that you're going to be doing today after I get through the notes on emotion is eventually you're going to be doing this worksheet here called emotional expression. And I'll explain it in more detail once we get through the little lecture here. But basically, you're going to be taking an online emotional intelligence or emotional detection test, testing how good you are at reading other people's emotions. And then you're going to answer a few questions about it. And then there's a few other questions that relate to a reading that's attached to the worksheet online. I do have paper copies, but it's probably easier if you just end up doing it online, but I'll leave that up to you. And the sub can pass out paper if necessary. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into the notes here and go through different theories of emotion that's important to cover according to the AP College Board. And talk about a few important talking points, and then I'll get you hopefully at least 20 minutes to work on that worksheet. You guys should leave here without any homework in theory. So here we go. Where we left off last time, we should have been talking about different theories of motivation, the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivators. And as I mentioned last time, hopefully intrinsic almost always trumps extrinsic if you can make that happen. Sometimes it's difficult to do in certain situations. So, theories of emotion. Basically, what we're going to be talking about here is what are emotions, and then what is happening inside of us that is triggering emotions. And there are different theories that are out there about what the connection is between our physical change in our body that occurs with certain emotions, like when you experience sadness or joy or whatever the emotion might be, and then that actual thought process of I'm feeling this emotion. So, as the definition states here, emotions are a mix of both physiological arousal, so like your heart might be pumping, your breathing increases, maybe you start crying, depending on what the emotion is, as well as then some sort of behaviors and feelings that are attached to it, some sort of way that you express that emotion, which could be tears, could be a smile, could be a frown. I'll get into different ways we can display our emotions and the way that we typically do that. So before we get there, though, let's take a look at these theories up here. So these three theories are the three main theories of the different theories of emotion, excuse me, which are the James Lange theory, Cannon-Bard, and then Schachter-Singer. So basically what is being shown here is there's a difference in understanding of which happens first. Does our physical change, our heart start beating, tears welling up, all that stuff, does that happen first? And then our brain goes, oh, I'm experiencing this emotion. Do they happen at the same time? Or is there something that's more involved here where we have to kind of think through the emotion we're feeling? That's kind of the difference between these three different theories here. So the first one on there, James Lange theory, it says basically that stimuli will trigger an autonomic nervous system arousal. So think like a fight or flight response in a way. Then the brain produces the emotion. So the arousal happens first in the body, then the emotion follows it. Okay, I'm going to flip back and forth between this screen and the next screen. Here's a mnemonic device to help you remember the James Lange theory. So James, it's got A then E in his name. Same with Lange, A then E. So you can remember the arousal is first, then the emotion. So in other words, like if I'm feeling scared, let's say something walks by my classroom window and bangs on the window, and all of a sudden I jump and I'm feeling a sense of fear. According to James Lange, the thing that would be happening first in my body is my heart would sink, my breathing would pick up, my pupils would dilate, right? I'd have kind of this moment of an autonomic nervous system, sympathetic nervous system kicking in. And then my brain would say, oh, I'm feeling fear. Okay, so it's the arousal first, then the emotion. Cannon-Bard argues, and these are all people's names, by the way, last names of people. Canon barred is a theory that basically says, no, you can't say this, then that. It's way too close to each other. Basically, we're going to say they happen simultaneously. So it's at the same time. So in that story that I just shared about someone banging on my window, the heart beating while my brain is also saying I'm feeling scared happens simultaneously. Okay. The mnemonic I give for this one on the next slide, it's a little silly, but take it or leave it. You don't need to use it. Cannon, I picture like a cannon firing off of like a pirate ship or something. And if I were to be standing right next to the cannon, I wouldn't be able to differentiate between the sound of it firing and the sight of it blowing and shooting its cannonball. Right? They happen basically simultaneously if I'm standing right next to the cannon. So that's the way that I remember what Cannon Bard argues. Okay, then the last one, Schachter Singer. Schachter Singer is also known as the two-factor theory of intelligence. This basically argues that it's too simplistic just to say this triggers that automatically. They basically say you need to have a second step in there in which your brain does a process called appraisal, cognitive appraisal, in which you think through and interpret what's going on here. So if you can see at the bottom here, if my stuff is in the way, it says a person's interpretation of the arousal and the context that they are in help us determine what caused the arousal, and then I ascribe an emotion to it, or I appraise an emotion. So that's what's being shown in this bottom one down here. If there's a stimulus, like dog barking, immediately there's kind of like my heart starts racing. So that does happen. But it takes the second step here of thinking about it before I can understand it. And the reason for that is because sometimes our heart can be beating for different reasons, right? Sympathetic nervous system isn't just for fear. I could sometimes have my heart start beating fast because I'm nervous or because I'm excited, right? And so it takes my brain to appraise the situation. To appraise means to like evaluate and think about it before I can get to the point of describing a emotion that goes with it. So that's the Schachter Singer two-factor theory. My mnemonic for that one, it's probably the worst one of all, if you ask me. So Schachter Singer two-factor theory, they both start with S, their last names. So it's the same letter, but a different name. In the same way, you could have the same physiological response, like your heart could be beating, but you could have a different emotion depending on the context and how your brain appraises it. So that one's a little bit of a stretch compared to the other two, in my opinion. But these are the three different theories of emotion that you got to know for the AP College Board purposes. All right, so James Lang, Cannon Bard, Schachter Singer, three different theories about how our emotions are connected to what's going on in our brain. Moving forward, this is actually, I will show that. Sorry, I'm all over the place. So this is kind of an interesting thing, and we'll come back to this later about how do our emotions connect to our physical body. And as I just explained, there's different theories how those two things are connected. One thing that's kind of an interesting thing is the emotions you feel very much so do change your physical biology. So what we mean by this is, here's an example of heart rate. Depending on which emotion you feel, and these are the 6 so-called universal emotions, and I'll talk about that later, you might be feeling different amounts of heart rate change. So most emotions actually raise your heartbeat. The one that actually drops it, the universal emotions, is disgust. When you're feeling disgusted by something, your heart rate actually drops. You also might have heard, like, when people get angry, they're feeling like hot. They get red, right? There's kind of, you can actually see it in their face. Their temperature actually does increase by a couple little point of degrees, not a full degree, but a small amount. Certain emotions like fear and surprise and disgust actually drop your body temperature by a little bit. So there are real physical changes that occur when you're feeling these emotions. Just briefly on this is kind of like an interesting side study that was done. And this kind of speaks to the importance of the Schachter Singer theory, this two-factor theory. We got to think through the emotions you're feeling. So some researchers wanted to know, does being in a dangerous environment like this is called the Capilano Bridge in Vancouver, Canada, which is one of those huge bridges that kind of sway a little bit as you walk over a giant drop-off, right? There's a long way down, 230 feet above the water. What they did is they ran a study where they basically had a fairly attractive psychologist woman standing in the middle of the bridge. And then they invited 18 to 35-year-old men, presumably heterosexual men, out to the middle of the bridge. And then after doing some psychology study that was basically a front, there was really no reason for them to be out there other than this interaction with the more attractive female. They had a chance to call for their results. And what they found, they ran this study both on the shaky bridge, and then they ran the same thing on a sturdy bridge. And they found that men were twice as likely to not just call to get the results, but also potentially ask her out for like a date when they were on the shaky bridge than they were on the sturdy bridge. So why would this be? If I was actually in the room with you, I'd take theories. But the idea here is that sometimes our brain can be tricked by the feelings that we have going on inside of us, and heartbeat, could increase for a couple different reasons. You might be feeling a sense of adrenaline rush when you're on the shaky bridge because you're scared. But if your brain reinterprets that and appraises it differently because you're in the midst of an attractive person, you might be thinking, oh, I'm like falling for this person, falling in love. And so that's what the theory is here. So I guess the takeaway would be if you're looking for a really great first date opportunity, you want to really wow a person, maybe do something dangerous with them, like go rob a bank or something. Don't do that actually. That's illegal. But perhaps you could do something more exciting, and that might trick the person into thinking that you are the exciting one more than the actual experience itself. So there's an aside. Okay, so embodied emotions. Whoops. I've just got 2 slides left here, and then we'll get you geared up for that worksheet. So, like I said, those are the different theories of emotion. But when it comes to emotional expression, so how do we actually show our emotions? There's some interesting evidence that shows that there is some universal understanding across all cultures around the world with certain basic emotions. So, this is what's called the universality hypothesis. And it's the idea that emotions are universal across all cultures around the world. And that is that when it comes to these 6 basic emotions, which they identify as joy, anger, disgust, fear, sadness, and surprise, everybody is able to recognize those emotions and also display those emotions in common ways. So you can see in this picture up here, they're labeled, but if they weren't labeled, you should be able to recognize these different emotions of what looks like a typical happy face, with the eyes crinkling, the mouth going up, anger, where furrow your brow and bring your eyebrows down. What fear looks like, where your eyes get really big. There are certain things that no matter what culture you're in, it doesn't seem to be culturally relevant, that everyone displays these emotions relatively the same. Now, there are some subtle differences from one culture to the next in terms of the way that we embody these emotions and display these emotions, almost the degree to which we do it. I'll say this on the next slide, but like Americans, for example, are stereotypically very emotive. We use a lot of emotion compared to other cultures, might not show these emotional displays as much, but it still is kind of the same format. The muscle movement's the same. Interestingly, this is also even true of blind people, people that were born blind. So, what this means, if we think back to Unit 1, we talked about empiricism versus nativism. This is an example of something that would be native to us, right? Where we are not taught how to display these emotions. It's almost that we're just like born with them. Because if a blind person has never seen someone show embarrassment or anger, but they still make the facial expression when they are angry, it's not something we learn by watching others. It's something that's just kind of rooted in our DNA, right? We're predisposed to it. Um, Other thing that's noted on here is that adults tend to be better at recognizing emotions. Part of this is because the development of the frontal lobe. We talked about this in developmental psychology. This is the last part of your brain to fully develop. And when we do thinking and planning and judgment, some of that is involved in that process. So you should be able to remember these 6 basic emotions. I think it might be helpful to draw an analogy to the movie Inside Out, if you guys have seen that. They have 5 of the 6, and joy or happiness, depending on which one you want to say. And in this context, we're going to say the same thing. Anger, fear. They have, I think, sadness and disgust. So I guess surprise is the only one that's not on there. So it's a helpful analogy +1, which is surprise. Okay. All right. Last slide here, emotional expression. And this is going to be something that you guys are going to testing yourself on when we get to the worksheet here. So like I said, we all have these universal emotions, the 6 that I just mentioned, and recognizing those emotions in other people, we use what are called display rules to be able to see that. And display rules vary by culture. I'm not going to embed these videos because it gets kind of weird with the screencastify thing. We'll come back and watch these later. If you really want to watch them now, you can. But I've got an interesting little take on Dr. Phil, and then also how culture influences our expression of emotion. We'll take a look at those next Monday, perhaps. So there are different emotional muscles that we activate, muscles in our face that show these different emotions, and these are what are called display rules. So how do we display our emotions? One such example is crinkle eyes. So crinkle eyes is when you can better tell there's a real smile. So this is a psychologist down here named Ekman, and he's displaying a real versus fake smile. You would be able to tell in studying this, and if you see this on other people's faces, that the one on the left here is the real smile, because you see that little bit of a crinkle in the outer sides of his eyes, where this one you don't. Even though the curvature of the mouth is the same, a genuine smile tends to have more of the crinkle eyes, is what they say. So, like up here, here's another example of it. This was a Miss USA contest. So, which of these two won? Hopefully, you'll be able to recognize that the woman over here, Miss Texas, won. You can see it in her eyes of genuine happiness, and this lady over here is kind of like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so happy for you," but she's, deep down, she's not. And that's the other thing about display rules. We can alter them, right? We do this all the time in society. We walk around saying, how are you? I'm good. How are you? Right? And we say we're fine. And whatever emotion we're truly feeling, we often mask it. So we can mask our emotions by doing what I just explained, which is kind of just putting on a brave face and pretending to smile even though we feel sad. We can also intensify our emotions. Intensification is when you build up an emotion that's not actually there. So like getting excited about a gift you got from Aunt Vera at Christmas, even though you're not excited about the hand knit sweater, you're just like, oh my gosh, it's what I always wanted. De-intensify, which is when you're really mad at a friend or somebody, and they're like, are you okay about this? And you're just like, oh yeah, it's fine. But deep down, you're actually feeling the intensity of the emotion. And then neutralization, which is kind of just like showing no emotion whatsoever to throw people off, like a poker face, I guess. Like I said, we'll come back to these videos later on here, as we get into it. All right, we are not going to get into this stuff. I'm going to say that for later. What we're going to do with the rest of the time then for today is this assignment, which again should be posted at this point in Unit 7. Find it. It's called Emotional Expression, or grab a paper copy from the sub. You're going to be doing one of two things and then answering some questions. So there's two links here. One of them is a emotional intelligence test. Some of you actually might have done this when we did the Battle of the Brains thing. So I would advise you to not do that if you've already done this once. But basically, I think it's 20 questions. Yeah, it's 20 photos. It's multiple choice. You click what the right answer is. You hit next, and it'll give you a score about how many right you got out of 20. Okay. So it's recognizing people's displays of emotion. How good are you at that? The other one, so the second link here, reading people smile, there's this first screen that pops up, and you can, I think, skip over it. I don't think you need to answer the question, and there's a little tutorial you can skip through. Basically, all you're going to be doing here is they show you a short little video clip, and in that video clip, there's a moment where the woman smiles. Hopefully, you can see this on your screen. And you have to determine, is the smile a real smile or a fake smile? So there she goes. Okay. And then you make your guess. Was that genuine, real, or was that fake? You go through and do that with each person. See how good you are at discovering, keep an eye out for crinkle eyes, that kind of thing. And then when you are done with it, it'll give you a score, I think, again, out of 20. And then for numbers 1 and 2, you're basically just saying, how did you do on the test? Was it harder than you expected or easier, etc.? And then on the worksheet for numbers 3, 4, 5, and 6, it's connected to a reading. And the reading is connected to the online worksheet. I also did print off, at least I should have printed off some paper copies if you'd rather just flip through that. But there's some interesting stuff from the textbook reading here. This is actually from a different textbook than your textbook that you have assigned, so you're not going to be able to find the exact wording of this. It's a more updated version. So grab a packet if you'd rather get a paper copy. But they talk a little bit here about gender and culture and about how these different things might influence our understanding of emotion. So you're going to use that to answer the questions that are on here. When you are done, you can submit this online or turn it into the bin. Tomorrow, I will kind of go through actually just probably this one slide. There's not much to talk about. And then we're also going to I'm going to have you on your own time watching a different video. It's going to be a light day tomorrow that relates to this learning. So get that emotional expression worksheet done. Shoot me an email if you have questions. I should be able to respond to emails throughout the day, today, tomorrow at certain points in case you have questions. So hope all is well, and we'll see you later.